I never imagined that doing what I believed was right, protecting my grandchildren, would cost me everything. My family, my friends, my place in the community. But when you see your grandchildren hurting, what choice do you really have? This is my story. The story of how I stood up for my grandchildren and lost everyone. My name is Helen. I'm 72 years old. I've lived in the same small town in Georgia for most of my life. I raised 3 children, buried my husband 5 years ago, and thought I knew what family was all about. But nothing prepared me for what happened when my daughter lost her way and left her children in a storm that nearly swallowed them whole. I thought protecting them would bring us together. Instead, it tore everything apart. I remember the first time I felt something wasn't right with Sarah. It wasn't obvious or dramatic, but it stirred a quiet panic in my heart. It started with small things, like missed phone calls, unanswered texts, and forgotten plans that she never used to overlook. At first, I thought it was just the stress of the divorce. Mark had left suddenly, and the breakup had shaken her deeply. She was always a strong woman, my daughter, but even the strongest need time to recover from heartbreak. I gave her space, thinking I was being respectful, waiting for her to come back to herself with time. But days turned into weeks, and I noticed that my grandchildren, Ella and Jackson, were the ones who kept calling me. Their voices were small and polite, asking if I could visit or bring over snacks or just stay a little while. I started to notice things when I dropped by, things I couldn't ignore anymore, no matter how badly I wanted to believe everything was fine. The lawn was never mowed, newspapers collected on the porch, and packages sat unopened by the door for days. I knocked once and heard footsteps but no answer, and then little Ella opened the door with tired eyes. She was only 6 years old but looked older somehow, quiet, cautious, and hesitant. Jackson, just 8, stood behind her with a juice box and mismatched socks, as if he'd dressed himself. "Is your mom home?" I asked, already knowing the answer by the silence behind them. "She's sleeping," Ella whispered, not meeting my eyes, her fingers twisting nervously in her shirt. It was 3 in the afternoon, and the house was dark, curtains drawn, the air still and heavy. I stepped inside, and the smell of old food and something sour hit me like a wave. Dishes were stacked in the sink, and flies buzzed near a bowl of cereal that looked a few days old. I wanted to believe it was just one bad day, but something in my heart told me this wasn't the first or only one. "Have you eaten today?" I asked them gently, kneeling down to their level, so they wouldn't feel afraid. Jackson nodded, but his stomach growled as if in betrayal, and Ella looked away. I took them out for ice cream that day and watched them eat like they hadn't had a treat in months. They laughed a little, but even their laughter felt fragile, like glass that could shatter at any second. I tried to talk to Sarah the next day, calling her over and over again, but she never picked up. I sent her a message. "I'm worried. Let's talk. Please." It remained unread. A week passed before I saw her again, and when I did, she looked like a shadow of the daughter I knew. She wore oversized clothes, her hair tangled, and her eyes glassy as she opened the door halfway. "Hey, Mom," she mumbled, barely able to focus, her voice scratchy and distant. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle but firm. "I'm tired, that's all." "Just tired," she said, and closed the door before I could say more. That night, I sat on my couch with a knot in my stomach, unable to sleep, thinking about the kids. I thought about Ella's silence, Jackson's dirty clothes, and the bruises I thought I saw but didn't dare to ask about yet. Something was very wrong. And the more I tried to rationalize it, the more the truth screamed louder inside me. I remembered when Sarah was a child, always neat, always on time, always the first to volunteer for everything. She used to tell me she wanted to be a better mom than I was, and I told her she already was. But now, I saw a woman lost in darkness, unreachable and disappearing day by day. I couldn't just watch anymore, not when 2 innocent children were being caught in the storm. One afternoon, I arrived unannounced again, and found Jackson sitting outside on the porch alone. "Where's Mommy?" I asked him, brushing a leaf from his shoulder. He shrugged, looking down. "She's been in her room all day." I walked inside, and the air was thick with a sharp smell, alcohol and something burnt. The TV blared a cartoon, but no one was watching it, and crumbs littered the floor around the couch. Ella was asleep in her school clothes, curled up in the corner with a blanket pulled to her chin. My heart ached as I realized this wasn't just neglect. It was emotional abandonment. I peeked into Sarah's room and saw her passed out, an empty wine bottle on the nightstand. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them away and walked back out, not wanting the children to see me cry. "Let's go to my house for dinner," I told them, and their faces lit up like it was Christmas morning. They ate spaghetti and garlic bread and asked if they could stay the night, just one night, please. I tucked them into bed in my guest room, kissed their foreheads, and stood outside the door listening to them breathe. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my phone, knowing what I had to do but terrified to do it. Reporting your own child is a kind of grief no mother prepares for. It feels like a betrayal and a rescue all at once. I thought about the possible consequences, the fallout, the screaming that would surely come. But I thought more about the kids, their safety, their future, their fragile hearts. So I made the call. I dialed the number for Child Protective Services with trembling fingers and a broken heart. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, guiding me through each question. "Yes, I'm reporting neglect. The mother is unresponsive for hours at a time. The children are frequently alone." I gave them my name. I gave them Sarah's name. I gave them everything. When I hung up, I sat in complete silence, the weight of the decision sinking into my bones. I whispered aloud, "I'm sorry, Sarah." Though no one could hear me, not even God, it felt. The next day, CPS showed up at Sarah's door. She called me within the hour, screaming and sobbing, furious and wounded. "You betrayed me," she yelled through the phone. "You've destroyed everything." I tried to speak, to explain, but she hung up before I could say more than her name. The silence that followed was worse than her anger. It was as if I'd been erased. The family group chat fell quiet. My siblings stopped calling. Church friends avoided me. I was the villain in everyone's eyes, the mother who turned in her own daughter. But when I looked into Ella and Jackson's eyes, I knew I had done the right thing. I saw peace returning, slowly but surely, like dawn creeping over the horizon. They were safe. They were warm. They were fed and hugged and heard. And me? I was alone. But I was strong. I was standing in the fire for them. I went to bed that night not as a mother grieving a daughter, but as a grandmother protecting her legacy. I had lost Sarah, maybe forever, but I had saved her children. And that, I told myself again and again, was worth everything. The fallout came faster than I expected, like a tidal wave after the warning siren has barely stopped ringing in your ears. Sarah didn't wait for explanations, apologies, or perspective. She responded with a rage that scorched every bridge between us. I had imagined some pain, some resistance, but I hadn't prepared for the firestorm that came from my own child. She called me 32 times that day, each voicemail angrier, more desperate, more bitter than the last. "Why would you do this to me, Mom?" she cried in one message, her voice cracking from fury and tears. "You think you know everything, don't you? Well, you don't know anything about me." I sat on my kitchen floor, listening to her voice with tears in my eyes and guilt pressing down on my chest like a weight. Guilt is strange. It makes you question even your most righteous choices. I reminded myself why I did it, over and over again, like a mantra to keep me from crumbling. I did it for the kids. I did it because no one else would. I did it because someone had to say, enough. Still, the pain of Sarah's words haunted me all night, echoing in my ears with venom and sorrow. "You've ruined my life. You just want to take my children and replace me. You're a monster." I knew that wasn't true, but hearing it from your own child feels like being stabbed with your own hand. And she wasn't alone in her outrage. My son Matthew called later that evening. I thought he might offer some balance, some understanding. But his voice was cold, clipped, distant, like a judge reading a sentence. "What the hell were you thinking, Mom?" he asked, skipping over any greeting. "I was thinking about Ella and Jackson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, you should have thought about your daughter first," he snapped. "Sarah is spiraling. She's in pain. And now you've turned the whole world against her." I didn't turn anyone against her. I stepped in because no one else would. "She's our sister," he growled. "You don't betray family." "I didn't betray her," I said firmly. "I protected her children from her." And with that he hung up. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Matthew blocked me that night. His wife, Jenna, unfriended me on every social media platform within the hour. No one called to ask what I saw, what I heard, what I felt in my bones. They only judged the action, not the reason. Even my sister Beth sent me a text that stung more than I'd expected. I love you, but you've gone too far this time. Too far. As if protecting two innocent children from neglect was a crime. As if doing the hard, ugly thing out of love was somehow betrayal. I looked around at my quiet house, at the two toothbrushes now resting beside mine in the bathroom. I wasn't a criminal. I was a grandmother who had stepped into the fire. But to the rest of the family, I had become the villain. My cousin Gail, who I hadn't seen in months, posted a vague message on Facebook. Family means everything. Blood is thicker than judgment. Dozens of likes and comments followed, all from people who knew nothing about what had happened. I wasn't named, but I knew it was about me. I felt the ice of public opinion creeping toward me like frost on a window. The people who once invited me to birthdays, baptisms, baby showers disappeared. At church, I saw them whisper as I passed by. The pastor looked at me differently, his sermons tiptoeing around themes of forgiveness, unity, and grace. I stayed quiet in my pew, feeling the weight of unseen eyes and unspoken accusations. Once after service, a woman I'd prayed with for years placed her hand on my arm. "I hope you find peace," she said, and walked away before I could ask what she meant. Peace. There was no peace in being cast out. No peace in having your love twisted into betrayal by the people you raised. No peace in the silence of once loved voices now turned cold. I stopped going to church 2 weeks later. Not because I lost my faith, but because I realized I'd become a stranger among believers. My world was shrinking fast, and only Ella and Jackson remained in it. I poured everything into them. I woke up at 6 a.m. to make breakfast and packed their lunches with notes that said, "You are loved." I walked them to the bus stop and waited until they waved from their seats. I sat through school conferences, dentist appointments, nightmares, tantrums, and bedtime stories. They didn't know what I'd sacrificed. They only knew they felt safe again. That was enough. But some nights, when the house was quiet and they were asleep, I let myself cry. Not for what I'd done, but for everything it had cost me. I cried for Sarah, who was once a bright girl with big dreams and now wouldn't return my calls. I cried for Matthew, who had chosen silence over understanding. I cried for the empty holidays, the chairs that wouldn't be filled, the photos that wouldn't be taken. I cried for being the villain in a story I never wanted to write. But I never cried with regret. I never wished I hadn't made the call. If I had to do it all over again, I would. Because love isn't about approval, it's about action. And I chose to act. One day, Ella sat beside me on the porch, legs swinging, popsicle in hand. "Grandma," she said, "are we going to stay with you forever?" I swallowed hard, staring into the pink sunset. "You'll stay as long as you need," I answered gently. She nodded, satisfied with that promise. She leaned her head on my arm and whispered, "I like it here. It's not loud." It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't dangerous. It was love. And even if that love made me the outcast, the betrayer, the crazy old woman in the eyes of others, so be it. I'd rather be hated for doing right than loved for standing by in silence. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up. It's who stays. And in the end, I stayed. I stayed when everyone else walked away. I stayed when it cost me everything. I stayed when no one thanked me. And I would stay again, 1,000 times over. Because that's what love really means. When the legal papers arrived, I wasn't surprised, but I still held them in my hands like they were on fire. The return address was the county courthouse, stamped in red with urgency and finality. Inside was a petition from Sarah, demanding full custody of the children, and accusing me of kidnapping. The words sliced deep, each one crafted to portray me as controlling, manipulative, and unstable. She claimed I had stolen her children during a vulnerable moment. She wrote that I turned them against her, lied to authorities, and isolated her from her own family. Reading the document felt like watching a stranger write my obituary. I sat on the edge of the bed, the pages trembling in my hands, and reread them 3 times just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. No, it was real. It was very real. Sarah had not only cut me out emotionally, she was now preparing to erase me legally. My hands shook as I called my lawyer, a kind man named Russell who had helped me once during my late husband's will. He listened quietly as I told him everything, from the CPS report to Sarah's descent into neglect. When I finished, there was a long pause. "This is going to get messy," he finally said. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "I don't care," I replied. "I have to protect them." The next few weeks blurred into a chaos of court dates, affidavits, social worker interviews, and paperwork stacked like mountains. I documented everything. Every meal I cooked, every doctor's visit, every school pickup and drop-off. Russell helped me file a formal motion for temporary custody, using the CPS investigation as evidence. Meanwhile, Sarah fought hard to reverse it. She hired a flashy lawyer who painted her as a victim of a controlling mother who couldn't let go. In court, I sat across from my own daughter while she avoided my eyes like I was poison. Her once soft face was hardened now, lips tight, gaze cold, arms folded in defiance. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened patiently as both sides presented their case. CPS had submitted reports indicating signs of neglect, missed school days, poor hygiene, unsafe conditions in the home. I submitted photos, texts, school records, and even statements from Ella and Jackson's teachers. Sarah's lawyer objected to everything. "She's weaponizing minor struggles," he claimed. "She's blowing things out of proportion." But I knew the truth. The children had been in danger. The court ordered a psychological evaluation for Sarah. It revealed signs of depression and substance abuse, and recommended treatment before any unsupervised custody. That recommendation changed everything. It validated what I had feared but couldn't prove on my own. Still, it didn't bring me joy. It broke my heart. I didn't want to win by proving my daughter unfit. I wanted her to be well. I wanted her to show up and say, "I'm ready now." But that day never came. Instead, she continued to spiral, missing her appointments, skipping drug tests, and arriving late to court. I watched her unravel piece by piece while trying to hold myself together. The hardest part was keeping Ella and Jackson away from it all. I protected them from the whispers, the headlines, and the legal jargon. I told them only what they needed to know, that grown-ups were trying to figure things out, and it might take a while. Jackson asked one night, "Do we have to go back to Mom's house?" I paused before answering. "Not unless the judge says it's safe," I told him. He nodded, then quietly said, "It didn't feel safe." His words were tiny but powerful, like a stone in a still lake. I knew that if I ever wavered, if I ever backed down, they might end up right back where they started. So I stayed strong. Even when I felt weak. Even when I cried into my pillow every night after they'd gone to sleep. Even when I stood in court, being judged for doing the very thing that love demanded. Sarah claimed I had turned the children against her. But the truth is, children can sense what words cannot explain. They feel safety. They feel chaos. They feel love, and they feel fear. And they knew in their own quiet way, who was showing up and who wasn't. The final hearing was the longest day of my life. I wore a navy dress, ironed the night before, with pearls that had belonged to my mother. I brought every document, every piece of proof, every witness I could. Sarah showed up late, wearing sunglasses indoors and smudged makeup. The judge reviewed the case with calm authority. She listened again to both sides, then turned to the children's court-appointed advocate. He stood up and said, "Ella and Jackson are thriving in their grandmother's care. They feel safe. They feel stable. They are doing well in school. At this time, we recommend full guardianship remain with Mrs. Bennett." My breath caught in my throat. The judge looked down at her notes, then up at me. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "it's clear that your actions were driven by concern and love. This court grants you full legal custody of Ella and Jackson, effective immediately." Time stopped. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too stunned, too hollow, too overwhelmed. Sarah stormed out of the courtroom without a word. No hug. No look back. No acknowledgement. She vanished, leaving only the echo of her heels on the polished floor. I gathered my things in silence. I looked at the chairs where Ella and Jackson would sit someday when they were old enough to understand it all. I walked out of that courtroom alone but victorious. Not victorious in the sense of beating someone, but in saving someone. Saving two someones. That evening, I picked up Ella and Jackson from school and took them to the park. They ran through the grass like the world had no weight. Ella brought me a flower she picked. Jackson showed me how high he could swing. And I sat there, watching them, wondering what they would remember of all this. Would they remember the courtroom? The tension? The fear? Or would they remember the laughter in the park? The bedtime stories? The soft songs I sang to help them sleep? I prayed it would be the latter. I prayed that one day they'd look back and say, Grandma didn't give up on us. Even if everyone else did. Even if it meant becoming the villain to others. Even if it meant carrying a title I never asked for, guardian. Because in my heart, I was simply Grandma. The one who showed up. The one who stayed. The one who loved them enough to fight. Winning custody should have felt like a victory, but it didn't. It felt like ashes. The joy I thought would come never arrived. Instead, a quiet emptiness settled in, spreading through every corner of my life like fog. Because while I'd gained two precious souls, I had lost nearly everyone else. My phone used to ring at least once a day, now it was silent for weeks. Birthdays passed without calls. Holidays came and went with no invitations. The family group chat that once overflowed with jokes and photos quietly removed me. Just like that, I was out. No announcement. No explanation. Just a subtle and complete erasure. I told myself it didn't matter. I had what mattered most, Ella and Jackson. But it did matter. It mattered when Matthew posted a family reunion photo, and I wasn't in it. It mattered when Beth's daughter got married and my invitation never came. It mattered when Christmas morning came, and only 2 stockings hung by the fireplace. I kept a brave face for the children. They were too young to notice how alone I'd become, but I felt it in the silence. In the quiet mornings. In the muted mailbox. In the empty chair beside me at church. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how things could change so fast. One decision. One choice made in love. And suddenly, I was a stranger to the people I'd once called family. They didn't ask how Ella was sleeping. They didn't wonder how Jackson was doing in school. They didn't want to understand. They just picked a side, and it wasn't mine. Worse than the silence was the judgment. Some spoke in whispers. Others weren't so subtle. At the grocery store, I bumped into Jenna, my daughter-in-law. Her smile was tight. Her voice colder than winter. Didn't expect to see you here, she said. I forced a smile. Just grabbing some milk. The kids go through it fast. She looked me up and down and said, I guess that's what happens when you play mother. Then she walked away, leaving her words like knives in the air. In those moments, I questioned everything. Was I too harsh? Too quick to act? Should I have given Sarah another chance before stepping in? But then I remembered the bruises Ella came home with. The nights Jackson cried himself to sleep. The garbage piled up in Sarah's kitchen while the kids went hungry. No. I had done what needed to be done. But doing the right thing doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with isolation. One by one, the people I loved closed their doors. Beth stopped answering my texts. My cousin Thomas unfollowed me on social media and posted cryptic Bible verses. Even the neighbor I once baked cookies for looked away when I waved. The world had gone quiet. And in that quiet, I faced myself. I looked at my reflection and asked, was it worth it? I answered, yes. Because every morning, I saw Ella smiling as she brushed her hair. Because Jackson no longer jumped at loud noises. Because their eyes sparkled again. I gave up everything so they could have something. Stability. Love. Peace. But it didn't mean I didn't mourn. I mourned the family dinners. The late-night phone calls with Sarah. The shared laughter over old photos. I mourned what could have been. What should have been. And what now would never be. One Sunday, I visited the cemetery where my husband was buried. I sat beside his grave and whispered all my pain into the wind. You always said love meant doing the hard thing. I said, voice cracking. Well, I did the hardest thing I've ever done. And now I'm alone. The wind didn't answer. But a single leaf floated down and landed in my lap. A quiet comfort. A gentle reminder. That even in loss, there is still presence. Even in silence, there is still meaning. I held that leaf all the way home. That night, I sat with the kids and read them a story. Ella leaned into my shoulder and whispered, "I love you, Grandma." Jackson kissed my cheek and said, "You're the best." And in that moment, I remembered my why. The love that cost me everything had also saved them. Not everyone understood. Not everyone had to. Because love is not a democracy. It's a quiet rebellion. A decision made in the dark, without promise of light. I had chosen them. And even if the world turned its back on me, I would not turn mine on them. Still, I prayed that one day, the rest of the family might see the truth. That love isn't always pretty. That doing the right thing sometimes looks wrong to people who weren't there. Until then I waited. With open arms. And a heart that still somehow hoped. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It's not a loud explosion or a single moment of clarity. It's quiet, slow, and nearly invisible. It looks like a child sleeping through the night for the first time in months. It sounds like laughter coming from the back seat on a drive home from school. It feels like a small hand reaching for yours without hesitation. That's what happened with Ella and Jackson. Their healing unfolded in whispers. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The first change came in the mornings. They used to wake up with shadows in their eyes. They would tiptoe down the stairs like they were afraid of waking a ghost. Now they ran into the kitchen with messy hair and hungry smiles. "Grandma, what's for breakfast?" Ella would ask, already pulling out plates. Jackson started humming to himself while brushing his teeth. Tiny things. Beautiful things. One evening, I heard them playing in the yard. They were pretending the swings were rocket ships. 3, 2, 1, blast off. Jackson shouted. I watched from the kitchen window, tears in my eyes. That joy had been buried for too long, but now it was resurfacing. I remember the first time Ella brought me a picture she drew. It was a house, with 3 stick figures holding hands in front. She pointed to them one by one and said, "That's you. That's me. That's Jackson." I asked her where her mom was. She paused, looked down and said softly, "Far away right now." There was no anger in her voice, just honesty. It broke me and healed me at the same time. They were beginning to understand in their own way. Not the legal words or the grown-up conflicts, but the feeling of stability, of being safe, of being wanted. Jackson had nightmares at first. He would cry out in the middle of the night, shaking, drenched in sweat. I'd rush in, hold him tight, and hum until his breathing slowed. Over time, the nightmares came less often. And then one night they stopped altogether. He slept through the night, and I cried the whole morning after. Because I knew that was a kind of miracle. School became easier for them too. Their teachers told me they were more focused, more confident. Jackson started answering questions in class. Ella joined the art club and painted a giant mural with sunflowers. I attended every event, every play, every science fair, every spelling bee. I clapped louder than anyone. Because every moment was sacred. Every smile was a milestone. We built traditions. Taco Tuesdays. Friday movie nights with popcorn and pajamas. Saturday morning pancakes shaped like animals. On Sunday evenings, we lit a candle and each said one thing we were thankful for. At first, they struggled. But eventually their lists grew longer. I'm thankful for Grandma's hugs. I'm thankful for my bed. I'm thankful we're not moving again. I kept a notebook of their thankful moments. On hard days, I read them back. They were proof that healing was real. We went to therapy too. A gentle woman named Dr. Lynn helped them name their feelings. She gave them tools to process sadness, anger, and confusion. She gave me tools too, ways to talk about hard things in soft ways. It wasn't always easy. There were days Jackson would shut down and not speak. There were nights Ella would cry for her mom. I never spoke badly about Sarah. I just listened. And when they asked, why did she stop coming? I said, I don't know, but it's not your fault. Because it never was. Children always blame themselves when adults disappear. I made it my mission to undo that lie. To remind them every day. You are not the reason she left. We planted a garden in the backyard. Each of us chose something to grow. Jackson picked tomatoes. Ella picked strawberries. I picked lavender. We watered it daily. We watched the sprouts break through the soil. It became a symbol of us, small things growing strong roots. One afternoon, Jackson brought in his first ripe tomato. He held it like treasure. "We made this," he said proudly. Yes, we did. We were making something, together. We went hiking on weekends, exploring trails and spotting birds. Ella kept a journal of what she saw. Jackson collected leaves and rocks. Nature became our church, our place of grounding, our reminder that change is possible. We celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes and balloons from the dollar store. I let them pick the theme each year. One year, Ella wanted a unicorn castle. The next, Jackson asked for a superhero scavenger hunt. I stayed up late planning every detail. Because these were more than parties. They were declarations of life. Declarations that their childhood was being reclaimed. There were setbacks. Jackson had a meltdown at school after a classmate mentioned mothers. Ella got quiet one day after seeing a photo of Sarah on social media. But we worked through it. We cried, talked, painted, walked, hugged. Healing is not linear. But it is powerful. They grew braver, softer, happier. They began to trust again. Not just me, but the world. And I watched them blossom. I watched Ella braid her own hair for the first time. I watched Jackson ride his bike without training wheels. I watched them dance in the rain, spin in circles, fall and laugh. It was beautiful. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Their wounds didn't vanish, but they were healing. Day by day, step by step, together. There are days when I miss Sarah so much it aches. Not the version of her that abandoned Ella and Jackson. Not the angry woman who slammed doors and yelled blame. But the little girl with freckles who used to sing into hairbrushes. The child who held my hand tightly when crossing the street. The teenager who wrote poetry on napkins and cried during old movies. That's Sarah. My daughter before the darkness came. I remember the day she was born. How her tiny cry made my heart swell with purpose. I remember how her eyes found mine as if we'd always known each other. She used to follow me around the kitchen, tugging on my apron strings. "Teach me to bake," she'd say with a flour-covered grin. She loved chocolate chip cookies the most. We'd laugh when the dough stuck to our fingers. I still see her in the kitchen sometimes, ghost-like in 12 again. She had a kindness then, a softness that made people love her instantly. She was popular at school, but humble. She brought home stray animals and broken things. She once taped a bird's wing with a popsicle stick and cried when it flew away. That was Sarah. My Sarah. But somewhere between teenage rebellion and motherhood, I lost her. The change didn't happen overnight. It crept in slowly. First came the missed calls. Then the excuses. Then the silence. Then came a man with cold eyes and a dangerous temper. I tried to warn her. I tried to hold her. But she slipped through my fingers like smoke. She insisted she was fine. She said the bruises were from clumsiness. She said I didn't understand her love. But I did. I understood it all too well. Because I had once loved a man who left me hollow. So I knew. I saw the signs. The lost spark. The lies. The weight she carried in her eyes. She got pregnant with Ella and promised she'd change. For a while she did. She was present, careful, attentive. She knitted tiny hats and decorated a nursery with fairy lights. She cried when Ella was born, big, beautiful tears. "I'm going to be better," she whispered to me. And I believed her. We all did. For a while she was. She breastfed. She sang lullabies. She rocked Ella to sleep while whispering dreams into her ears. Then came Jackson. And with him the storm returned. The man was gone, but his shadow stayed. And Sarah unraveled. She stopped answering the phone again. She left the kids with strangers. She missed appointments. She lost jobs. She made promises and broke them in the same breath. And yet I kept hoping. I kept praying. Because that's what mothers do. We believe in our children long past the point of reason. We hold on, even when it hurts. I remember her birthday after Jackson was born. She came over late, eyes red and movements slow. She hugged me for the first time in months. I held her longer than she expected. "Mom," she said, "I don't think I'm okay." It was the most honest thing she'd said in years. I offered help. I offered therapy time off, a safe space. She took it for 3 days. Then she disappeared again. I found Ella hungry that week. Jackson had a rash that hadn't been treated. And still I loved her. Still, I remembered who she used to be. Still, I clung to old drawings and birthday cards she once made for me. Best mom ever, one said in crayon. I kept it in my drawer like a lifeline. Because that child still existed, somewhere inside her. But addiction and grief are thieves. They steal potential. They twist memories. They cloud judgment. They don't care about promises. There are nights I wonder what broke her. Was it the man who hit her? Was it the guilt of not being enough? Was it the fear of becoming me? I'll never know. Because she never told me. And now she's gone. Not dead. But distant. More absent than any grave. Once I dreamed she came back. She stood on the porch with trembling hands. I'm ready now, she said. And I opened my arms. But dreams don't last. And each morning I wake to the same empty street. Still I whisper to the wind, come home. Not for me, but for them. Because Ella still keeps a photo of her mother under her pillow. And Jackson still asks, does mom miss me? And I never lie. I say, I think she does. Because I want to believe it. Because maybe one day, the girl who loved chocolate chip cookies will return. Maybe one day, the woman she became will ask for forgiveness. And I will give it. Because I already have. I forgive her every morning. Every night. Every time I kiss her children. And tell them they are safe. This love is not conditional. It is not proud. It does not keep score. It waits. And waits. And waits. Dear Sarah, I've started this letter 1,000 times in my head. And each time it feels like my heart is writing in tears instead of ink. You probably don't want to hear from me, or maybe you do. But the silence between us has stretched so far that I'm not even sure you'd recognize my voice anymore. Still, I write, because I have to, because I love you, and because even after everything that's happened, you are still my daughter. I don't know when exactly I lost you, but I remember what it felt like to watch it happen and be unable to stop it, like screaming into a storm that never ends. You were fire when you were young, bright, fierce, full of laughter and questions, running barefoot through summer grass, daring the world to break you. You called me your best friend when you were 5, and back then, I believed there wasn't anything we couldn't get through together. Do you remember how we used to bake cookies at midnight just because we could, and dance around the kitchen like we were the only 2 people in the world? There's a silence in that same kitchen now, one that echoes with all the things we never got to say before the damage was done. I still keep the photograph of you holding Ella for the first time. Your eyes were tired, but your smile was real, full of wonder and fear and love. You said, I don't know if I'll be any good at this. And I squeezed your hand and said, you already are, because I meant it. You loved them once, fiercely and beautifully, and I will never take that from you. Those first moments were real, no matter what came after. I don't blame you for breaking under the weight of it all. Motherhood is heavy, and sometimes we crumble before we ask for help. But what I can't forget, what I can't forgive, even though I want to, is how you let their light fade while chasing your own shadow. They were so small, Sarah, so in need of you, and you vanished like smoke, leaving behind empty bowls, dirty clothes, and eyes that stopped believing in bedtime stories. I know what addiction can do. I've seen it eat people alive, turn love into lies and warmth into absence, but it doesn't make it easier to explain to the children. Jackson still asks about you in whispers, like saying your name too loud might make it hurt more. And I never know how to answer without breaking. Ella stares at your picture sometimes, not with anger, but with something worse, confusion, and I see her trying to remember the sound of your voice. You said once that I stole them from you, but the truth is, I found them drowning and I jumped in to pull them out because no one else would. I didn't want to take your place. I wanted you to rise up and claim it, to fight for them, to come home and prove me wrong, but you never did. Still, I don't hate you, not even close. I hurt, yes, but I don't hate. Because hatred is too heavy a thing to carry when you're already holding grief. I see you in Ella's stubborn tilt of her chin and Jackson's love for music. And every time I do, I smile and ache at the same time. I hope you're out there somewhere healing. Even if I never see you again, even if the only reunion we have is in my dreams. I hope you found peace, or at least the first bricks of it, something steady enough to stand on, something that doesn't crumble beneath your feet. I forgive you, not because what you did didn't matter, but because holding on to the pain forever would only bury me alongside the memories. I forgive you because I want the children to know that love is stronger than anger, that family is built not on perfection, but on grace. You were not a monster. You were a mother in pain, a woman lost in darkness, and while you caused harm, you also gave life to two beautiful souls. I don't know if you'll ever come back, and part of me is terrified you might, but another part still sets a place for you in the back of my heart. This letter isn't meant to guilt you, it's meant to be a bridge, even if you never walk across it, even if it just hangs here between us in silence. I remember how you used to cry over baby birds falling from nests, and I wonder if that tenderness still exists inside you, buried under everything. I hope someone somewhere is kind to you, that they see you not as your mistakes, but as someone still worthy of a second chance. Because I saw you before the world hurt you, and I will never forget that girl who held dandelions like they were magic. I hope one day you read this and know that no matter what happens next, you were always loved, fiercely, fully, and without condition. Even when I was angry, I loved you. Even when I had to go to court, I loved you. Even when the judge gave me custody, I loved you. Even when you screamed that I'd ruined your life, I loved you. Even now, when you haven't called in over a year, I love you still. That's the kind of love mothers carry. It survives storms, silence, and the sharpness of grief. I won't say I'm unbreakable. This broke me more than you'll ever know. But I will say I'm still here, holding on. I'm still setting out 3 plates at dinner, just in case. I'm still keeping the birthday cards you once made me, tucked away like tiny treasures. I'm still whispering your name in my prayers at night. And even though this letter may never find its way to you, I needed to write it. I needed to speak the words I've swallowed for too long, because silence has its own kind of sorrow. So this is it. My truth, my forgiveness, my love, wrapped in paper and aching hope. If you ever want to come home, I'll be waiting, not with judgment, but with a tired heart and open arms. If you never do, I will still be loving you from a distance, cheering for your healing, mourning the parts of us that were lost. Because once you were my baby. And no matter how grown you are, how far you've gone, that part never changes. You were mine. You still are, in some way. And no court, no silence, no heartbreak can take that away. This letter may stay tucked away in a drawer forever, yellowing with time, unread. But my love? That will never fade. Wherever you are, Sarah, please know, you were never unloved. You were never forgotten. You are still my daughter. And I still believe there's a spark inside you worth saving. Always. Mom. The morning sun filtered gently through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the quiet living room where I sat clutching a worn photograph of Ella and Jackson. The weight of years pressing down on my chest like a storm waiting to break, and then the sound of a hesitant knock at the door stirred something deep inside me. A trembling hope that fluttered nervously like a fragile bird freed from a cage after too long in darkness. When I opened the door, there she was, Sarah, standing there with eyes tired but searching, her hands trembling as if carrying the weight of all the moments she missed and all the apologies she hadn't yet found the words to say. And in that moment, time seemed to hold its breath, as though the universe itself recognized the fragile thread of connection we were about to weave anew. Her face told stories of battles fought in silence, nights spent in lonely rooms where shadows whispered lies, but beneath that tired exterior, I glimpsed the spark of the girl who once danced barefoot through the summer fields, laughing with abandon and dreaming wildly. And suddenly, all the years apart shrank to nothing, replaced by a raw, aching tenderness that swept through me like a tide. I reached out slowly, my hand shaking as it touched hers, and in that simple connection, I felt both the weight of all the pain and the possibility of healing. An unspoken promise that while the past could never be erased, the future could still be written in moments of forgiveness and fragile hope. We sat together on the porch steps, the morning breeze carrying the scent of lavender and earth, and she began to speak, haltingly at first, about the darkness that had consumed her, the mistakes that haunted her dreams, and the love for her children that never faded even when she was lost. And I listened, my heart breaking and mending at once, knowing that this was the beginning of a journey neither of us could have predicted, but both desperately needed. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke of nights spent wandering, seeking something she couldn't name, and I held her hand tighter, reminding her gently that while the road back was long and uncertain, it was never too late to find her way home, to rebuild the trust that time and distance had worn thin but never destroyed completely. Ella and Jackson, sensing the change, peeked from the window with wide eyes, their small hands pressed against the glass as if reaching through the distance to touch the hope blossoming just beyond the door. And in that moment, the fractured pieces of our family began to shimmer with the fragile light of possibility. I promised Sarah that no matter what came next, the door would remain open, the table set, and the hearts willing to forgive and embrace, because love, however battered, was a force powerful enough to bridge even the deepest divides, and sometimes the smallest step toward healing was simply choosing to come back. That day marked not an ending but a fragile new beginning, one written in cautious words, tentative embraces, and the slow, steady rekindling of bonds that had once seemed lost forever but were, in truth, waiting patiently beneath the surface to be rediscovered and cherished anew. And as the sun climbed higher, warming the porch where we sat together, I realized that sometimes the bravest thing a family can do is to open their hearts to the possibility of forgiveness, even when it feels like everything has been broken beyond repair. Rebuilding what was lost is never a straightforward path. It twists and turns through tangled emotions, fragile hopes, and the scars left by time's unforgiving passage, reminding us that healing requires more than just the passing of days. It demands patience, resilience, and an unyielding belief that love, no matter how battered, can sew together even the most torn fabric of a family broken by silence and pain. Each morning brought with it a mixture of dread and hope as we sat together at the old kitchen table, scarred by years of hurried meals and hurried words, and learned to speak again, this time slower, softer, with voices weighted by the ghosts of the past but yearning toward the light of forgiveness and the promise of new beginnings. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached out to hold Ella's during a quiet afternoon, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and longing that told stories deeper than any apology could capture. But in that simple touch, the delicate seed of reconciliation was planted, ready to grow through the cracks left by years of absence and misunderstanding. Jackson's laughter returned slowly, like a hesitant dawn breaking through the heavy fog of uncertainty, and I saw in his bright eyes the child who had once dreamed of superheroes and adventure, reminding me that even after the darkest storms, innocence and joy have the power to return, carrying with them the promise of better days. We made mistakes along the way, too many perhaps, because rebuilding meant vulnerability, and vulnerability means risk, and sometimes we fell back into old patterns of blame and silence. But each time, we picked ourselves up and tried again, learning that love is not flawless but fiercely persistent. There were days when Sarah's pain erupted like a sudden storm, her voice trembling with anger and sorrow, and I held space for her tears without judgment, knowing that anger is often the language of hurt, and that healing begins when we allow ourselves to feel the depths of our brokenness before we can rise again. Ella would curl up in my lap during those moments, her small hands clutching my sweater as if anchoring herself to the one constant in her shifting world, and I whispered stories of hope and courage, reminding her that even when life feels uncertain, love remains the strongest thread that can weave us back together. Slowly, the walls we had built around our hearts began to crumble, brick by painful brick, revealing the raw, vulnerable core beneath. A place where forgiveness could take root and grow, watered by tears and the quiet determination to move forward, even when the past threatened to pull us back into its shadows. Sarah attended support groups, sometimes hesitantly, other times with fierce determination, sharing her story with strangers who became witnesses to her struggle and champions of her recovery. And in those circles of shared pain and hope, she found the strength to believe in herself again, even when doubt whispered relentlessly in her ear. The children's smiles grew wider, their laughter more frequent, and I watched as the invisible threads of connection slowly knitted us closer, weaving a tapestry of family renewed not by perfection, but by the courage to try again every day, no matter how heavy the past might weigh on our shoulders. I learned to let go of control, a hard lesson for a grandmother who had carried the burden of protecting these children through so many storms, realizing that healing is a journey each person must take in their own time and way. And sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing space for growth, even when it means facing uncertainty. Family dinners became sacred rituals, moments where we shared not just food but stories, laughter, and sometimes tears, creating new memories layered over old wounds, building a foundation of trust brick by fragile brick, one meal at a time. Sarah's voice grew steadier as she read bedtime stories to Ella and Jackson, her words weaving comfort and safety into their dreams. And in those quiet moments, I saw glimpses of the mother she yearned to be, tender and strong, imperfect but unwavering in her love. There were setbacks, days when old demons threatened to consume her again, and nights filled with restless worry. But through it all, we learned that healing is a marathon, not a sprint, and that sometimes the smallest step forward is the greatest victory. Jackson's art began to fill the walls of our home, bright splashes of color that spoke of hope, resilience, and the unspoken joy that comes with feeling safe and loved. And each painting was a testament to the power of a family willing to rebuild from the ashes. I found myself growing alongside them, learning to forgive not just Sarah, but myself, for the times I felt powerless and the moments when fear threatened to silence my hope. Realizing that love's greatest power lies in its ability to heal both giver and receiver. Every morning, I woke with a quiet prayer in my heart, that this day would bring us closer, that wounds would soften, and that the laughter of my grandchildren would fill the rooms once more, echoing through the halls as a song of resilience and renewed faith. Sarah's hands, once shaky and uncertain, began to steady as she took steps toward rebuilding her life, finding work, reconnecting with old friends who believed in her, and most importantly, learning to believe in herself again, piece by fragile piece. Ella's trust, once fractured, began to mend in small but significant ways. Soft hugs that lasted longer, shy smiles that grew into belly laughs, and the quiet assurance that her mother was coming back to her, slowly but surely, like a sunrise breaking through the longest night. Through all the struggles, the tears, and the moments of despair, we learned to celebrate every small victory. The phone call answered, the homework completed, the day without anger, as milestones on the long road to healing, each one a beacon of hope in the darkness. I saw Sarah's eyes light up when she talked about the future again. Dreams once buried beneath layers of pain resurfacing like fragile shoots pushing through frozen ground, reminding me that even the hardest winters give way to spring. Our home, once heavy with silence and sorrow, began to fill with music again. Jackson's laughter, Ella's humming, Sarah's tentative singing, all blending into a chorus of healing that grew louder with each passing day. I learned to listen, not just with my ears but with my heart, to the unspoken needs, the fears hidden behind smiles, and the hopes whispered in quiet moments, because rebuilding a family means hearing what cannot always be said aloud. Sarah's journey was not mine to fix, but mine to support with open arms and an open heart, offering love without conditions, understanding without judgment, and hope without limits. We found strength in vulnerability, courage in forgiveness, and peace in the simple act of choosing each other every day, despite the scars, despite the pain, despite the past that threatened to pull us apart. The children's eyes, once clouded with confusion, began to sparkle with the light of security and belonging, and I realized that rebuilding was not just about mending broken bonds, but about creating new ones, stronger, deeper, and more enduring than before. There were moments when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when fear whispered that the past would repeat itself and hope was a fragile illusion. But in those moments, we held on to each other, reminding ourselves that love's power is greatest when it is tested. I saw Sarah reach out to her own mother in quiet acts of grace, seeking forgiveness and offering it in turn, breaking cycles of pain that had spanned generations, and planting seeds of healing that would grow long after we were gone. Every step forward was a testament to human resilience. The stubborn refusal to be defined by mistakes, the fierce desire to reclaim life and love, and the unbreakable bonds that hold family together even in the darkest storms. I found joy in the little things, the way Ella's laughter filled the rooms, Jackson's drawings brightened the walls, and Sarah's smile grew more genuine with each passing day. A reminder that healing is found not just in grand gestures, but in everyday moments of connection. We learned to rebuild trust by showing up, consistently, patiently, and with open hearts, understanding that trust is earned slowly and lost quickly, but never beyond repair if nurtured with care. The road was winding and difficult, marked by setbacks and breakthroughs, tears and laughter, anger and forgiveness, but each step forward brought us closer to the family we were meant to be: imperfect, resilient, and bound by love. Sarah's journey was a mirror of our own, reflecting the pain and hope, the loss and redemption, and the endless capacity of the human heart to heal when given the chance. I held on to the belief that no matter how far we had fallen, no matter how broken the pieces, there was always a way back, through courage, compassion, and the simple yet profound act of choosing love over fear. Ella and Jackson became symbols of hope, their smiles and hugs reminders that innocence and love can survive even the hardest trials, and that families can be rebuilt on foundations stronger than before. I learned to let go of past regrets and embrace the present with open arms, welcoming each day as a gift, each moment as an opportunity, and each person as a chance to grow and heal together. Together, we navigated the complexities of rebuilding, not by erasing the past but by weaving it into the fabric of our future, stronger and more beautiful because it was real and lived. I saw Sarah grow into a woman transformed, not perfect, but brave enough to face her demons, gentle enough to ask for help, and determined enough to rewrite her story with love and hope. The children thrived in the safety of renewed family bonds, their laughter filling the halls with a music that had once been silent. And I knew that despite all the pain, we had created something lasting and true. We celebrated milestones, birthdays, graduations, first jobs, with tears and joy, marking each as a victory not just for the children but for the whole family who had fought to reclaim their place in each other's hearts. Healing taught us humility, that sometimes, the greatest strength is found in admitting weakness and asking for help, and that love is an endless well, deep enough to hold all our fears, failures, and hopes. Our home became a sanctuary, a place where mistakes were met with grace and where every member felt seen, heard, and loved, a far cry from the silence and fear that once threatened to tear us apart. Sarah's voice, once shaky and uncertain, grew strong and sure as she shared her story, not just with us but with others, becoming a beacon of hope for those walking similar paths and proof that redemption is possible. I watched with pride as the children blossomed into kind, resilient souls, shaped not just by their hardships but by the unwavering love that surrounded them, teaching them that family is more than blood. It is choice, commitment, and endless forgiveness. Together, we built rituals of love, Sunday dinners, bedtime stories, family game nights, that became the threads weaving our lives into a tapestry of belonging and joy, healing the wounds one smile, one hug at a time. I learned that rebuilding what was lost is a journey without a finish line, a dance of hope and perseverance, and that every day offered new chances to choose love over fear and connection over isolation. The past would always be a part of us, but it no longer defined us. Instead, it served as a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of love to mend even the deepest wounds. As we looked forward, we did so with cautious optimism, knowing that challenges would come but confident that together, we could face them, armed with the lessons of our past and the promise of a better future. Our story was no longer one of loss and separation but one of healing and reunion, a testament to the unbreakable bonds that tie family together and the enduring power of forgiveness to transform pain into hope. And so, with hearts battered but brave, we continued to rebuild what was lost, not erasing the past but honoring it, not forgetting the pain but embracing the promise of love's healing light guiding us forward, step by fragile step, toward a future reclaimed and cherished. As the seasons turned and the years gently folded into one another like pages in a well-worn book, I came to understand that finding peace after such turmoil is less about erasing the scars of the past, and more about embracing the journey with all its jagged edges and unexpected turns, realizing that the deepest kind of peace is born from acceptance, a quiet surrender to the truth that life, in all its imperfect beauty, will never be perfect, but it can still be profoundly meaningful when held in the hands of love, forgiveness, and hope. The house that once echoed with silence and uncertainty began to hum with the gentle rhythm of healing. Laughter danced through the hallways like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. And though the memories of pain were never far, they softened with time, becoming the foundation on which we built a new family story. One not defined by absence or mistakes but by the courageous choice to move forward together, hand in hand, hearts open wide enough to hold both the past and the future. Sarah's eyes, once shadowed by doubt and fear, now sparkled with the quiet confidence of a woman who had faced her demons and survived, her voice carrying the strength of someone who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed but unbroken, ready to love fiercely and live fully, teaching me that peace is not the absence of struggle but the triumph of the human spirit over it. Ella and Jackson, growing up surrounded by a family slowly mending its fractures, blossomed into young souls who carried within them the resilience forged in the fires of hardship, their laughter ringing clear and true, their hearts open to love and kindness, reminding me every day that the seeds we plant in soil rich with forgiveness and care will always bloom, no matter how harsh the winter. I often found myself sitting quietly in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon as the sky bled shades of pink and gold, and felt a profound gratitude settle deep in my bones. A gratitude not for perfection, which we had long since abandoned, but for the messy, beautiful reality of family reclaimed, where every hug, every shared story, and every moment of understanding was a testament to the power of love's gentle persistence. We created new traditions born from this hard-won peace, Sunday afternoons filled with board games and baking, quiet mornings where we shared hopes and dreams over steaming cups of tea, and the simple but sacred act of saying, "I love you," with sincerity and frequency, weaving threads of connection that strengthened our bond and anchored us firmly in the present, where healing could truly take root. The past, with all its pain and regrets, became not a chain to hold us back, but a teacher guiding us toward compassion, patience, and empathy, reminding us that every soul carries their own burdens, and that true peace begins when we learn to hold those burdens gently, for ourselves and for those we love. Watching Sarah nurture Ella and Jackson with tenderness and dedication filled my heart with a bittersweet joy, knowing how far she had come and how fiercely she loved her children despite the shadows she had fought. And in those moments, I saw the true meaning of redemption, not as a destination but as a daily choice to show up, to love, and to believe in the possibility of a better tomorrow. Life's unpredictability remained a constant companion, but we faced it together, a family knit tight by shared experiences, honest conversations, and the knowledge that while wounds might never fully fade, they could be softened by love's steady hand and the willingness to forgive both others and ourselves. I learned to treasure the quiet moments, the soft sighs after a long day, the gentle clasp of a small hand in mine, the way laughter could fill a room and chase away the lingering shadows, because these simple acts were the bricks building the foundation of peace, brick by brick, moment by moment, until the fractures began to feel like the unique texture of our shared story rather than signs of brokenness. Sarah's journey toward healing was ongoing, filled with both setbacks and triumphs. But with every challenge, she grew stronger, her spirit tempered like steel forged in fire, and her determination to be present, to love, and to heal inspired us all to keep believing in the power of transformation and renewal. The children thrived in this new chapter of their lives, their laughter and curiosity reminding me daily that even the deepest wounds can give way to growth, and that love, when nurtured with patience and grace, has the power to rewrite the hardest stories into ones filled with hope and possibility. I found solace in the knowledge that peace is not something we find by chasing perfection, but something we create through kindness, understanding, and the courage to keep moving forward even when the path is steep and uncertain. Together, we learned that family is not a static ideal but a living, breathing tapestry woven from the threads of our shared pain and joy, struggles and victories, tears and laughter, each thread adding depth, color, and meaning to the whole. Our home became a sanctuary where imperfections were welcomed and mistakes forgiven, where every voice was heard and every heart was safe, a place where the past shadows were met with light and the future held the promise of new beginnings. I saw Sarah grow into a woman who could finally look in the mirror and see not just the pain etched into her features but the strength, courage, and love that had carried her through the darkest nights and into the dawn of healing and hope. Ella and Jackson flourished, their spirits nourished by the love that surrounded them, their dreams growing bigger with each passing day, and their smiles brighter, a testament to the resilience that lies within every child when given the chance to feel safe and cherished. We marked milestones not just with celebrations but with gratitude, each achievement a beacon of light that illuminated the hard-won path we had traveled together, reminding us that every step forward was a victory worth cherishing. I learned that finding peace after loss and pain is a continuous act of choosing love, compassion, and forgiveness over fear and resentment. A commitment to healing that requires strength, patience, and an open heart willing to embrace both the light and the darkness within ourselves and others. Our story, once fractured by hurt and separation, had transformed into a narrative of resilience and hope, a living testament to the power of family to endure, heal, and grow even after the deepest wounds. The lessons we learned together, the importance of presence, the value of forgiveness, the strength found in vulnerability, became guiding stars in our lives, helping us navigate the uncertainties of the future with grace and courage. I found peace not in forgetting the past but in honoring it, carrying its lessons with me as a reminder of how far we had come and how deeply love could heal the wounds that once seemed insurmountable. Sarah's laughter, once rare and fragile, now filled our home with a warmth that thawed the coldest memories. And in her smile, I saw the promise of a future reclaimed. A future where love was the foundation and peace the reward. Ella and Jackson's hands in mine felt like the strongest anchors in the world, grounding me in the present and reminding me daily that no matter what storms we faced, we were not alone. Together, we built a new legacy, one defined not by the hardships endured but by the courage to forgive, the determination to heal, and the unbreakable bonds forged through love and shared experience. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it. There are thousands of grandparents out there fighting silent battles. Let them know they're not alone.